Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier and this is the Piracy Show, and today we are talking about a topic that we haven't touched on in quite a while. We're going to be asking a question: why don't we have access to our NPC crew members? Now, I'm not, when I'm asking this question, I'm not asking it in like as in like an accusation, like CIG, I demand a response, blah 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 blah. I'm just kind of puzzling over why it doesn't exist in the game yet. Now, if you're wondering why you're not hearing any sound from the ship in the background, it's because this was me and a bunch of the Scum members together on Saturday, and we were hunting down players with bounties. We were just experimenting with the new systems, enjoying, the new little patch that we had got. We were having a lot of fun, but once again, those were private conversations. So whenever that happens, I just kill the audio in it and play the music in the background. Hope you don't mind. But in manning this turret, it brought me back to that question. Why don't we have access to our NPC crew members? Now, you might be sitting here kind of puzzled and wondering, what NPC crew members? What are you talking about? When did we ever get access to this? Where are they, and how do I buy them? So essentially, how this works, how this is supposed to work, let me phrase it that way, is that if you own more than one game package, additional game packages on your account will basically function as a high quality NPC crew member on your ship. That's what you can turn them into. Now, back, I think it was around 2014 or 2015 when we got the release of the Javelin during, that anniversary sale when that all happened. There was also a big promotion for game packages, trying to get people to buy game packages and send them to friends, but also keeping in mind that this was a thing that already the community knew about. So what ended up happening was game packages went up for $20, and players were scooping up game packages not to give to friends, but to keep and use to crew their vessels. And so this kind of got a little bit out of control, and a bunch of people bought a bunch of game packages. They got scooped up hella fast, and people were just like, oh, well, there you go. NPC crew members, now I can fully man my ship. So if I've got a large multi-crew ship and no one happens to be online that I can play with, I can, don't want to really phrase it this way, but I can play with myself and just, use my NPC crew to, fill out all the empty duty stations on my ship. That was kind of the idea. Now, since then, we've heard very little on this topic, but we have started to see evidence in the game that this is something that, to a certain degree, is already implemented. Now, if you do the Pirate Swarm, or if you're fighting large multi-crew NPC ships in the persistent universe now, you'll know that the turrets are active and that there are NPCs who are sitting in those turrets, firing those turrets at you. So those are NPC crew members manning the turrets of ships, using them. That is something that is in game right now, and that's something that's been in game for a little while. But why don't we have access to it? Now, I've kind of come up with two plausible explanations for this. Or perhaps one explanation that reinforces what I think is the most likely explanation and gives it another reason for them to kind of hold off on it. The first one, I think, is it's a technical challenge from a point of view of work that needs to be done. It's not something that's impossible for them to do, but it's something that is probably not all that high on their priority list given their, stated priority of Squadron 42. This is probably not something that they need to implement. And while, we may look at it and say, oh, well, they've already got it, so why don't they just, switch it on? You have to understand that while a developer in the background can create an NPC and assign that NPC to a seat, to a location in a ship, we have none of that user interface, and we have none of those tools to create a character, clothe a character, assign stats or values to a character, however that's going to exist in the game, and then assign that character a job that suits those values, if that's even a thing that we're going to have, or if characters are going to be a little bit more general. And there's going to be a UI that needs to be designed around this whole system, and we know that UI is something of a big problem for CIG right now, not because they don't know what they're doing with it, but because they've been working on it for so long that they've actually gotten to a point where they're now forced into kind of pushing that ball down the field, because the existing UI is, and these aren't just my words, they're CIG's words as well. It's pretty terrible, and it needs a major revamp. So while they're working on all of that, I doubt they're going to take the time away from doing the UI that governs so many other things in the game, which we already have access to basically sideline that and put in kind of a side feature that probably is a priority down the road, but isn't a priority right now. One of the other things that could be kind of putting this on the back burner, one of the things that CIG might be pushing back with, is the idea that if you put in automated tools that allow players to just kind of replace other players, that make it a little too convenient, it could develop a habit within the community where people just automatically rely on NPCs instead of relying on other players. And that can, it seems like a convenient feature. It seems like a feature that you would very much want. You say, of course, I'm like, for instance, if you're like me, sometimes like I shoot out of bed at like 3:00 in the morning and I'm not going back to sleep. Who else is going to be online at 3 a.m., right? But at the same time, making those tools sometimes a little too easy, it can destroy a little bit of the social fabric of the game. It can allow certain social muscles, if you will, within the community to atrophy and become kind of ill-used. And I mean, I could use the most obvious example, which would be the WoW example, when the automated group finder tool started to come in mid Wrath of the Lich King and onwards. It really destroyed the need to interact with other players, except for when you really had to, and you could just kind of jump in anonymously, get things done, and then jump out, and you didn't really have to interact with these people anymore. And that was one of the things that I think really eroded away at the social fabric of the game when that game came back as classic and all those tools were gone. It forced people to interact with other players, and I think that it kind of illustrated a lot of the problems that can afflict a game over time. It's an intangible, but I think it's an important part of the game, giving good reasons for players to interact with one another. Now, while that sounds like an argument against, I think that depending on how the NPCs are balanced, depending on how it all works out, it may end up that while NPCs are a good, tide me over type situation where they're good to sit there when you have no one else to sit in that position, and they'll do pretty all right, you may want to get an actual player to sit in that seat, because an actual player is probably going to do a better job. So an NPC is good enough, but having an actual player there is something that is so much better. And I think if the game hits that balance point in the right way, then it can eliminate that concern. I mean, you're always going to have certain players who, for whatever reason, don't want to play with other people. I mean, whatever, however you choose to play the game is however you choose to play the game, fine. But I think that if you can hit that balance point right, if you can kind of come in and say, you know what, an NPC is just good enough, but a player is probably, especially someone who knows what they're doing, who is good at it, is going to be a better choice. If you hit that, if you hit it that way, I think you can eliminate that concern. But possibly that's one of the things that CIG is thinking about, is that if NPCs are too good, then it could eliminate the need to bring other people on your ship, and people might default to just stacking their ship with NPCs, which obviously would be profitable for CIG, but at the same time, it may make it to the point where just out of sheer convenience that we never actually group up with other players and it becomes something very rare. I mean, I've seen discussions, I've not really been through it, but I've seen discussions about the multi-crew features of Elite Dangerous and how multi-crew has not really emerged to be a thing in Elite Dangerous. I may be wrong about that. And I totally allow for that because I'm not an expert on that game and nor an expert on that community. I don't pretend to be. But these are just some of the things that I have heard. So if that's the case, I would think that you'd want to put multi-crew in a position where it's desirable, where it's something to pursue, something to chase after. And so maybe they're a little bit afraid that if they get people into the habit of just dragging and dropping NPCs onto turrets, they're just going to be like, you know what, dude, just get in your own ship because I've already filled up my ship and I'm good to go. What I would love to see from CIG on this topic, or more specifically, what I would love to see or hear from Tony Zurovec, is what their thoughts are on the system, what their concerns are, what are the things that they're looking to implement, what are the points that they're trying to hit with this system. I would love to know, even if it's just broad strokes, even if it's nothing concrete, like, and here's a working example we can show you. But I would love it if at a Citizen Con or at, any kind of developer summit where they're talking to players, if someone would push that question up to the front of the line and say, give us your thoughts. At the very least, give us your thoughts on this system, how you would like to see it implemented, and what's your ideal of how it would work in the game. I would love to know more about what CIG thinks about this, but in the beginning, when I'm referring to this as being something from a long, long time ago, we really haven't heard all that much about it since. So I would love to hear what CIG's current thinking is. What do you think? I mean, is it just a UI hurdle, or is it, also some community concerns that kind of drive the reason why we don't have this in game already? There were certain NPC things that appeared on the roadmap for Squadron 42, but have since, I think, been a little bit tamped down and kind of pushed aside. And I would like, what do you think? Is that, why is CIG kind of holding back on this? Clearly, there is something of a functional model for it in the game already. Why don't we have access to it?
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Star Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.